Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We're taking a deep dive today into the incredibly difficult and often devastating reality of infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not just looking at the act itself. We're exploring, the complex layers of deception, emotion, and consequence that crash down, especially on the person who's been betrayed.
And this dive is grounded in something really powerful, I think. It's drawn from the experiences of experts who spent years receiving and answering letters, letters from people wrestling with infidelity.
Right.
So we're pulling insights directly from thousands of real-life accounts, giving us a true ground-level view.
Right. So our mission here is to kind of dig into those often unseen impacts of cheating, understand the profound reasons it's so devastating, and get right to the heart of what this material reveals. What it truly means for the person on the receiving end of betrayal. It's about cutting through the noise, really, and focusing on the lived reality presented in these letters. So let's jump right into that initial moment of discovery, because the material makes something immediately clear. Infidelity is rarely just like one single bad act.
That's so right. What these thousands of letters reveal is that it's a series of deceptions. I mean, even a single encounter involves scores of hidden decisions.
Scores?
Yeah, and a long-term affair can represent thousands of separate mental acts of concealment and lying.
Thousands. That's staggering. And when confrontation happens, is there a typical pattern that emerges from the person who cheated?
Absolutely. Time and again, the pattern described in the letters is denial and minimizing. The experts found that the cheater tends to only admit what is already known.
Only what you can prove.
Pretty much. Only what has become undeniable.
And the explanation for this from the material is, well, it's stark, isn't it?
It is. Bluntly put, there's simply no advantage for the cheater in telling the complete truth. Their perceived advantage lies squarely in continuing the denial or, minimizing the severity.
Right.
As one letter writer put it, denial has become his best friend.
That makes the process of uncovering the truth utterly frustrating, maddening even, for the betrayed person. I remember those examples cited, like Frank's wife denying being at the bar, then denying the park. Only admitting it when confronted with actual proof.
Yeah, layer by layer.
Or that chilling story, the husband who actually used the lie that his wife was mentally unstable and promiscuous just to manipulate the other woman into cheating with him.
It's awful.
And that cold response someone got when they asked about text messages. Why?
Right.
These examples really show the sort of self-serving nature of that denial script.
They really highlight how that predictable pattern focuses solely on the cheater's self-preservation, regardless, of the impact on the other person.
Okay, so moving beyond that initial shock and denial, the sources really delved into the intense emotions of betrayal, making it clear this goes far deeper than just like sadness or disappointment.
Oh, definitely. The impact is profound because infidelity attacks something we've assigned immense value to. The authors use that striking analogy, the De Beers diamond thing.
Oh, yes.
Connecting something inherently common, like a rock, to something deeply cherished, like engagement and marriage.
Right. You give it immense value.
Exactly. So when the foundation of that value, like trust in a relationship, is shattered by deception, the emotional fallout is just immense.
And one emotion specifically highlighted as primary and powerful is disgust. The research mentioned, like Ekman and Miller, points to its fundamental role.
Disgust functions as a primal warning system. Miller describes it as a kind of cringing or recoil.
Recoil, okay.
Possibly rooted in avoiding toxic things, like by touch or smell. In this context, it's an emotional recoil, telling you something is fundamentally contaminated or wrong in a deeply visceral way.
And the letters provide really graphic examples of this physical reaction. People literally getting sick.
Yeah, vomit.
Even vomiting when they read notes, find a calendar entry, or when the details become unavoidable.
We hear about Marguerite in Africa feeling like vomiting, the Marine officer getting sick just thinking about the details,
Oh, God.
the fiancé who felt like throwing up.
And a crucial point is, this kind of disgust doesn't just respond to willpower, does it? You can't just decide not to feel it.
No, not at all. It's a deeply rooted, automatic, physical and emotional response. It sort of bypasses logical processing in that moment.
Then there's anger. The material refers to it as a loyal friend in this situation, which is an interesting way to put it.
It is, but it makes sense. Anger in this context is the signal. It's the emotion that clearly tells you when a significant boundary has been violated and you have been betrayed. It's protective in a way.
And unfortunately, the tension and emotions unearthed by the situation can escalate to violence, according to these accounts.
Yeah, that comes through too.
Not just from the betrayed person, like the Canadian woman who smashed her boyfriend's car.
Which you can maybe understand, emotionally, even if it's not right.
Right. But, disturbingly, also defensive violence from the cheater when confronted.
Yes. Things like grabbing hair, choking, smashing a phone, it just underscores the extreme volatility that deception can create.
What I found really striking in the sources was this idea that infidelity violates something fundamental within us, this deep, almost innate desire for justice, fairness, and equity.
The experts who wrote this book really emphasize this point. They point to research like DeWall's studies with monkeys reacting to unfair rewards.
Right, the grapes and cucumbers.
Exactly, or findings from the ultimatum game in behavioral economics. They argue that our need for justice isn't just something we're taught. It's deeply embedded, perhaps evolutionary.
Why evolutionary?
Because our ancestors lived in social groups where rules about fairness were, necessary for survival. Cooperation depended on it.
So, betrayal feels so profoundly wrong because it directly assaults this deep-seated, almost biological need for things to be fair.
Precisely.
That example of the pilot's wife, she wasn't satisfied with just a divorce. She wanted him publicly known as a cheater. That really illustrates this primal desire for justice highlighted in the letters.
It's a powerful example of that system wanting the ledger balanced, in a sense, wanting the truth out there. And this connects directly to another fascinating concept discussed, the cheater detection system.
Ah, yes, that specialized mental program. Tell us more about what the material reveals about that.
Well, drawing on the work of researchers like Cosmides and Tooby, the idea is that our minds evolved a specific mechanism, a mechanism to detect when someone is benefiting by breaking a social contract, an if I do A, I get B type of rule.
Okay, like reciprocity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's presented as innate, not learned, and quite robust across culture.
And the sources connect the intense pain of betrayal back to this specific system.
Precisely. Because historically, failing to detect or deal with cheaters could be incredibly costly, even perilous for survival or reproduction. So that intense pain isn't just emotional hurt. It's seen as a signal from this ancient warning system screaming, danger, you've been wronged in a way that could harm your survival or well-being.
That makes so much sense. It explains the depth of the hurt. This leads us naturally to trust. And the material has a key principle to describe its nature after betrayal.
They call it the asymmetry principle, which is quite intuitive when you think about it.
Okay, asymmetry. How so?
Trust is incredibly difficult and slow to build, right? It requires many positive interactions, consistency.
Takes time.
But it's alarmingly easy and fast to destroy. It only needs a few instances of betrayal, sometimes just one big one. And once broken, it leaves a persistent suspicion in its wake. It's hard to get back.
That Nietzsche quote they used really captures it. Not that you lied to me, but that I no longer believe you has shaken back.
Exactly. It's the foundation that's shattered.
The damage from infidelity is shown to be just pervasive.
Yeah.
It reaches into areas like truth itself, causing trauma, and even leading to that bewildering phenomenon of self-blame. The material is very clear about the destructive nature of lying itself.
Yeah, lying is described as far more than just saying false words. It's framed as an act of assuming power over another person's reality.
Assuming power.
Yes. These experts call it an assault that attacks a person's dignity and well-being. It steals power from the deceived person. It reduces their available options.
Because they're acting on false information.
Right. And it forces them into a reality they never, ever agreed to.
A reality that can include, exposure to STIs, significant financial repercussions, immense emotional and psychological damage.
All things they didn't consent to risk.
And the lies impact children too, even in ways that aren't immediately obvious. That Machiavelli quote about hiding truth among lies. It's a stark reminder of the intentionality behind this deception.
Yes, the more layers of concealment and the longer they persist, the deeper the damage becomes. It compounds.
The letters also highlight the reality of infidelity as a traumatic event, with predictable aftereffects.
Like any trauma, it's a fundamental violation of a person's sense of safety and reality. It shatters your worldview. The symptoms described in the letters are really consistent with trauma responses. Physical issues like rapid heartbeats, stomach problems, insomnia.
Constant anxiety.
Yeah, emotional turmoil like despair, intense anxiety, loss of self-worth. And mental symptoms like intrusive thoughts, difficulty concentrating, constantly replaying
Kind
events.
of replaying, yeah.
These are very common reactions to this kind of deep violation.
And then there's that perplexing phenomenon the authors discuss. Victim self-blame, even when the betrayed person is demonstrably completely blameless.
It's unfortunately a known characteristic of trauma survival. You see it in situations that seem, completely nonsensical from the outside.
Like the tsunami survivor example they mentioned.
Right, blaming herself. Or in psychological studies showing how hindsight bias makes us judge outcomes unfairly. I should have known.
But why? Why blame yourself?
Self-blame, in a twisted way, can offer the illusion of control in a situation that feels utterly chaotic and unfair. The thinking goes, if only I had done X differently, this wouldn't have happened. It provides a false sense of agency, even though it's misplaced.
And this is where the experts who wrote this book become quite critical, pointing out a significant ethical issue with how some people respond to this.
They express really strong reservations about certain therapists or maybe clergy members who perhaps unintentionally but harmfully leverage this trauma-induced self-blame. They might push victims toward accepting responsibility for their partner's choices.
The phrases
Phrases like, take your part in this, or what did you contribute to your partner's dissatisfaction? These are seen as incredibly damaging and effectively playing right into the cheater's narrative, shifting the blame.
So the advice from the material is clear on this.
Very clear. Be extremely wary of anyone suggesting your partner's cheating is somehow your fault. The choice to cheat belongs solely to the cheater.
Okay. Let's turn now to some concepts people frequently wrestle with after betrayal. Forgiveness and closure. The sources offer a nuanced, perhaps less traditional perspective on these.
Yeah, forgiveness is often discussed, but the experts differentiate sharply. They distinguish between letting go of resentment, which is presented as absolutely crucial for the victim's own healing and ability to move forward.
Right, for your own sake.
Exactly. And extending goodwill or positive regard towards the person who caused the harm, those are seen as two very different things.
And they see extending that goodwill as ethically questionable, even potentially reckless. Why reckless?
Yes. They argue it's often a kind of psychological compensation for the victim. I'll be the bigger person. But it doesn't change the fact that they suffered a significant loss. More critically, they argue it can prevent the wrongdoer from facing the real consequences necessary for them to genuinely understand the gravity of their actions and potentially change.
So it sort of lets them off the hook too easily.
In a way, yes. The focus, they argue, should be compassion for the wronged party, not premature goodwill towards someone who needs to stop doing wrong and understand the impact.
Okay. And what about closure? People desperately seek it, right? But the sources suggest the typical understanding of it is often a trap.
It really is. The letters show people wanting answers, wanting the cheater to apologize sincerely, wanting things to somehow make sense or go back. But the experts point out that relationships, like life, rarely provide neat endings. There are almost always threads dangling, things left unresolved.
So the kind of external closure people want, getting what they hope for from the other person, is often unrealistic.
Very often, yes.
So true closure has to happen within you. Is that the idea?
That's the core insight. It's an internal declaration. It's you deciding, this is done, it is finished, this is what happened, this is what could not be, now I begin again.
Accepting the reality.
Exactly. Seeking it from the other person or expecting the situation to provide a tidy ending is presented as a trap that keeps you emotionally stuck, just waiting for something that probably won't come. Life moves on. It doesn't neatly close like a book.
The sources also directly address the reality of staying with a cheater, and they don't shy away from detailing the potential consequences and risks involved.
No, they are very direct about this. The material suggests staying can come with external judgment or stigma from others who know. It reflects that old saying, lie down with dogs, get up with fleas.
Ouch.
Trying to present a happy ending to people who know the truth simply isn't believable. Based on the accounts in these letters, people see through it.
And they introduce a psychological concept here called the deterioration trap. Can you explain that?
It's a powerful analogy drawn from psychologist Scott Plouse. Like heroin addiction, you might stay, not because the relationship itself brings pleasure or fulfillment anymore.
But because leaving seems too hard.
Exactly. But because the pain and perceived difficulty of leaving feel unbearable, you become stuck in a state of dependence on avoiding the pain of withdrawal or change, rather than seeking actual happiness.
That's a grim picture. The experts are also quite critical of certain authors or therapists who seem to minimize the impact of infidelity or shift blame onto the victim.
They really take issue with perspectives that suggest affairs are somehow morally neutral, not inherently good or bad, or perspectives that refuse to distinguish between the victim and the person who victimized them, sometimes implying the betrayed person has some form of complicity.
Implying they somehow caused it or allowed it.
Right. These views are seen as just unsupported by the reality described in the thousands of letters they analyzed and ethically concerning. They also point out that dismissing a betrayed person's intense pain and reaction as just jealousy is the classic argument used by a hardcore cheater to avoid responsibility.
It's a way of invalidating the profound injury. The sources also offer a brief look at the perspective of the other person involved in the affair.
Their own conflicts and rationalizations.
And they take a stance on whether to tell the betrayed spouse that can be controversial.
Based on the thousands of letters they reviewed, the experts argue pretty strongly that knowledge is power. They contend that most innocent parties, given the chance to truly understand the risks and consequences, like STIs or financial exposure, would want to know the truth.
To protect themselves.
Exactly. To make informed decisions about their own health and future.
One of the most heartbreaking areas covered in the material is the impact of infidelity on children.
Oh, absolutely devastating. The experts state unequivocally that knowledge of an affair and the resulting conflict always creates dysfunction for children. Always. It often forces them into an impossible position, feeling like they have to choose sides between their parents or keep secrets.
We hear those voices from the letters, illustrating this pain so clearly. The 15-year-old who carried her mother's affair secret for years.
Burdened by it.
Yeah, burdened by it, and growing up scared of marriage because of what she witnessed.
Or the teenager whose parents offered vague bullcrap reasons, as she put it, for separating.
Right.
Only for her to later learn the truth about the affair and realize her parents had been so preoccupied with their own drama that she felt completely neglected.
Just collateral damage.
Sadly, yes. And the poignant accounts of adult daughters dealing with a father who cheated, abandoned them. And years later expects a relationship, expects access to grandchildren while still being with the affair partner.
How does the material frame that difficulty for children?
Partly in terms of justice versus forgiveness, aligning with that concept of consequences we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The father wanting the benefits of a relationship acceptance, family connection without having earned them through consistent presence and ethical behavior is presented as fundamentally selfish. The idea is that forgiveness, especially in this context for the children, doesn't automatically require allowing an injurer back into your life, particularly when they haven't demonstrated real change or understanding of the harm caused.
So it aligns with that principle, as you sow, so shall you reap.
Pretty much. Actions have consequences, and demanding forgiveness or acceptance without addressing the actions is unfair to those who are hurt.
So after absorbing all this difficult reality, the central, critical question emerges. What do you do now? From the perspective of the betrayed person.
Right. What now?
The sources offer some non-negotiable, mandatory first steps.
First and foremost, get tested for SPIs. Immediately.
No delay.
No delay. You have to protect yourself, especially from someone who clearly didn't prioritize your health. The experts even recommend potentially testing more than once, as some infections have incubation periods.
Okay, that's crucial. And the second mandatory step, if you have any shared finances or assets.
Consult a lawyer privately. Find one who is completely separate from your social and professional circles. Don't use the family lawyer.
Why privately?
Because you need unbiased advice about your rights and options without your partner influencing the situation or even knowing you're exploring it yet. Get an initial consultation, often free. Understand your legal standing regarding assets, debts, maybe children.
Knowledge is power, again.
Exactly. The experts emphasize that simply considering all your options, staying, leaving, different legal routes, is a crucial way to begin regaining your power after someone else's actions have been forced upon you.
It puts you back in the driver's seat, somewhat.
Yes. Someone made choices that fundamentally altered your life's landscape without your consent. Now, deciding what your next steps will be, understanding the possibilities, is vital to moving forward beyond feeling like just a victim.
The material suggests different ways to approach making such a monumental decision. It's not easy.
No, it's incredibly hard. They suggest tuning into your gut feeling, what they call your heart of hearts. What does your deepest intuition tell you? You can also use zero-based thinking.
Explain that again.
Essentially asking yourself, if I weren't already in this relationship, knowing everything I know now, would I choose to get involved with this person today?
That's a tough question.
It forces clarity. And critically, consider the opportunity cost. What potential positive life paths, what happiness, what benefits are you giving up by choosing to stay in a compromised, painful situation?
There's also that interesting technique mentioned, the premortem. Sounds a bit grim.
It does, but it's practical. Drawing from cognitive psychology, the idea is to imagine yourself a year from now. And imagine your decision to stay in the relationship has turned out to be a complete disaster, a wretched decision.
Okay. Sure.
Then list all the concrete reasons why it failed. What went wrong? What were the predictable problems that came true? This exercise isn't about predicting doom. It's about injecting a healthy dose of realism. It forces you to confront potential negative outcomes you might otherwise ignore out of hope or fear.
Confronting the potential downsides head on. Ultimately, the sources suggest the core challenge in the face of betrayal is acceptance.
It is incredibly difficult, probably the hardest part. You have to live in reality. You can't cling to wishes or hopes about what you desperately want to be true, but just isn't.
Accepting that the relationship, as you knew it, is over or fundamentally irrevocably changed.
Yes. And that's painful because it often challenges your identity, your vision of the future, everything you thought you had.
And the experts writing this material are critical of others who seem to ignore this harsh reality for the betrayed person.
They really are. They argue that experts, therapists, whoever, who simply urge you to stay or confidently declare, oh, you can get past this, are potentially exposing the betrayed person to further hazard.
How so?
Because they might be ignoring the established facts of repeated deception, the nature of the trauma involved, and the deep patterns of behavior described over and over in these letters. Thinking the cheater will magically change for you is often called an impossible goal in this material.
Which brings us to the big question. Can a cheater change, according to the thousands of experiences reviewed here?
The experts are very cautious on this, very skeptical, frankly. They suggest that a person's core nature, their fundamental character patterns, are very resistant to change.
So it's unlikely.
While change is theoretically possible, the material presents it as highly unlikely, particularly if there hasn't been some kind of major external consequence or deep, genuine internal reckoning from the cheater themselves. Not just words, but real change. And, crucially, thinking they will change specifically for you is presented as an almost certainly unobtainable goal, a dangerous hope.
So the only way to definitively end the possibility of another betrayal
From this specific person.
right from this person
Is by leaving the relationship entirely. That's the stark conclusion from these accounts.
Wow. This has certainly been a deep and challenging exploration into the difficult realities of infidelity, drawing directly from the experiences shared in these letters.
It really has. And the overwhelming message that comes through from these sources, I think, is the vital importance of living in reality, of confronting the profound impacts of betrayal, emotional, psychological, social, even physical, and understanding that just wishing things were different doesn't alter the facts of what happened.
It feels like such a powerful reminder that knowledge is power in this situation. Understanding the dynamics, the patterns, the risks, and the decision about what to do next is ultimately yours alone, the listeners alone. And critically, only you will experience the true consequences or potential benefits of that choice down the line.
Absolutely. And perhaps the final thought to leave you with, drawing from the experts' insistence that truth corresponds to facts. In the face of such profound deception, what does it truly mean to commit to living by the facts presented by reality, rather than clinging to hope for a different outcome that may never materialize? How does that difficult process of accepting reality, even when it's incredibly painful, become the necessary first step towards regaining your power and beginning the long process of rebuilding your life?